Captain Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien fleet surrounding Earth through the viewport of the UES Defiance. Hundreds of ships from a dozen different species hung in space like predators circling wounded prey. The Galactic Council had finally come to collect what they called their due. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Council flagship," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded. "Put them through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Vextar, a reptilian being with scales that shifted from green to gold depending on the light. Behind him stood representatives from the major council races, the insectoid Zephyrians, the gaseous Nathari, and the crystalline Valdorians. "Captain Chen," Vextar's voice carried the weight of authority that had crushed 100 worlds. "You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. Earth will become a protectorate under council jurisdiction. Your species will serve as laborers in our expansion efforts." Sarah felt her jaw clench but kept her voice steady. "And if we refuse? Then we will take your world by force. Your primitive weapons cannot stand against our combined fleets." Vextar's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "We have seen your military capabilities. Impressive for such a young species, but woefully inadequate against our might." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that burned in her chest. They had fought too hard to reach the stars only to bow down now. "Commander Rodriguez, status report on our defensive preparations," Sarah ordered. Her first officer consulted his tablet. "All orbital defense platforms are online. The lunar installations are ready. Fleet Admiral Harrison has positioned our ships according to the Chen pattern. We have approximately 200 vessels ready for engagement." Sarah nodded grimly. 200 ships against nearly 1,000. The math was stark, but humans had never been known to surrender easily. "Captain," interrupted Ensign Park from the sensor station, his voice tight with excitement. "I'm detecting something unusual." Multiple jump signatures forming at the edge of the system. The main screen shifted to show the outer reaches of the solar system. Space began to ripple and tear as ships emerged from hyperspace. But these weren't council vessels. Sarah recognized the sleek, angular design of Corvan warships, the organic curves of Thessian biocraft, and the geometric precision of Andorian battlecruisers. "How many ships are we seeing, Ensign?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. "Still counting, Captain, but it looks like at least 300 vessels. All flying Alliance transponders." Commander Rodriguez stared at the display in amazement. "Those are the species we helped during the border conflicts. The Corvans, the Thessians, the Andorians, even some smaller races." Sarah remembered those conflicts well. 3 years ago, when the Council had launched aggressive expansion campaigns against independent worlds, Earth had chosen to intervene. Not for profit or territory, but because it was right. Human fleets had arrived at Corvan Prime just as Council forces prepared to bombard civilian population centers. Earth's intervention had saved millions of lives and turned the tide of several battles. The Council had been furious, imposing economic sanctions and threatening Earth with isolation. But humanity had stood firm in their principles, continuing to offer aid and protection to any species that asked for it. "Incoming transmission from the Corvan flagship Stellar Talon," Torres announced. The display showed Commander Thrakon, his blue-scaled face bearing the ritual scars of a Corvan war leader. "Captain Chen, the Corvan Republic stands with Earth. We have not forgotten who stood with us when darkness threatened our worlds." More transmissions followed. Admiral Sivara of the Thessian Collective. "Humanity showed us that honor still exists among the stars. Today we repay that debt." Captain Zarthan of the Andorian Free States. "Earth called us friends when the Council called us slaves. We answer that friendship now." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest as more and more species declared their support. The Rillan Mining Consortium, the hegemony of Talneth, the Independent Merchants Guild, even the mysterious Voidwalkers had sent representatives. "Admiral Vextar is transmitting again," Torres reported, his voice barely containing his excitement. The reptilian's confident demeanor had cracked visibly. "What is the meaning of this, Captain Chen? These species have no business in council affairs." Sarah stood straighter, feeling the weight of Earth's convictions behind her words. "Admiral, these are our friends. When Earth chose to help them, we didn't calculate profit margins or strategic advantages. We helped because it was right, because they needed us and we could make a difference. Impossible, Vextar hissed. No species fights for others without gain. What did you promise them? Nothing, Sarah replied simply. We asked for nothing in return when we helped them, and we've asked for nothing now. They're here because they choose to be. The alien admiral's scales shifted to an angry red. You think this changes anything? Even with their support, you cannot match our firepower. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was genuine. Admiral, you're right about one thing. We can't match your firepower, but there's something you've forgotten about humanity. And what is that? We don't fight alone anymore. As if summoned by her words, more jump signatures appeared throughout the system. Ships continued to arrive, each carrying species that humanity had helped, protected, or simply befriended. The Corvan Republic's entire home fleet, Thessian bioships that could regenerate damage in real time, Andorian vessels equipped with the most advanced shield technology in known space. But it wasn't just the major powers. Smaller species arrived too. The aquatic depths dwellers with their unique sonar-based weapons, the mechanical construct collective with their hive mind coordination, even the peaceful harmony singers whose ships could disrupt enemy communications through their natural telepathic abilities. Sarah watched as Admiral Vextar's confident expression transformed into something approaching fear. The Council fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming just hours before, was now outnumbered nearly 2-1. You have 12 hours to withdraw from Earth space, Sarah announced calmly. These friends of humanity have come a long way, and they're not particularly patient with bullies. The transmission ended, and Sarah allowed herself a moment to absorb what had just happened. Earth's loyalty to its principles had been rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. Admiral Vextar's flagship, the Dominion Fang, trembled as emergency meetings raged in its command center. The massive council chamber aboard the ship buzzed with panicked voices from a dozen species, each more agitated than the last. This is unprecedented, clicked High Magnate Clixara of the Zephyrians, her mandibles chattering with nervous energy. No species has ever assembled such a coalition against the council. Vextar studied the tactical display showing the growing fleet of human allies. Each new arrival made the situation more complex. These weren't random mercenaries or desperate pirates. These were organized military forces from legitimate governments, all unified under one impossible banner: friendship with humanity. Analysis. Intelligence Director Nalthor. Vextar commanded the floating Nathari consciousness that served as his strategic advisor. The gaseous being's voice resonated through specialized speakers. The data is troubling, Admiral. Every species present has documented history of human intervention on their behalf. The Corvans were saved from orbital bombardment during the siege of Corvan Prime. The Thessians received critical medical supplies during their plague outbreak. The Andorians were protected from our expansion fleets 3 separate times. And they received what in return? Demanded Council Representative Zurnash, her crystalline form refracting the bridge lighting into harsh rainbows. Nothing, Nalthor replied after a pause. Records show no payment, no territorial concessions, no trade agreements. Human aid was provided without conditions. The bridge fell silent. In galactic politics, such behavior was not just unusual, it was incomprehensible. Every species understood the fundamental rule of interstellar relations. Nothing came without a price. Impossible, Zurnash's voice rang like struck crystal. No species acts without self-interest. There must be hidden agreements, secret treaties. We have interrogated captured human personnel from previous conflicts, Nalthor continued. Under truth serums and telepathic scanning, their statements remained consistent. They genuinely believed their actions were morally correct. Vextar felt his scales shift to a deeper shade of green. Moral action without benefit was a concept that challenged everything the Council represented. They had built their civilization on the principle that might made right, that the strong naturally dominated the weak. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Lethmon, we're receiving another wave of arriving vessels. The Celestial Navigation Guild, the Free Traders Alliance, and what appears to be the entire Rimworld Coalition. The tactical display updated again, showing Earth space becoming increasingly crowded with allied vessels. What had started as a simple subjugation mission was rapidly becoming the largest fleet engagement in galactic history. Admiral, Clixara's voice carried a note of genuine concern. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. A diplomatic solution might be preferable. Vextar's laugh was harsh and bitter. Diplomacy? With primitives who have been in space for less than 2 centuries? The Council's authority cannot be questioned by children playing with starships. These children have assembled a fleet of 800 vessels, Nalthor observed dryly, and more continue to arrive. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Defiance, Sarah Chen coordinated with an ever-growing list of Allied commanders. The main conference room had been converted into a multicultural command center, with holographic displays accommodating species that breathed different atmospheres or existed in various physical states. The deployment pattern is coming together nicely, reported Admiral Thraken from his position near the environmental controls designed for amphibious species. Corvan vessels will take point positions using our heavy armor to absorb initial strikes. Thessian bioships will provide support with their regenerative capabilities. Captain Zarthan nodded from within his environmental suit. Andorian vessels will maintain rear guard positions, providing long-range fire support and shield assistance. Our defensive matrix can protect approximately 60% of the Allied fleet simultaneously. Sarah studied the 3-dimensional battle map floating above the conference table. Each Allied species brought unique capabilities to the fight. The Mechanical Construct Collective could link their ships into a single coordinated entity. The Telepathic Harmony Singers could disrupt enemy communications across multiple frequencies simultaneously. "What about the Voidwalkers?" asked Commander Rodriguez, gesturing toward the mysterious section of space where several ships seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty. A voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We maintain our traditional role. When the battle begins, we will ensure that Council reinforcements cannot arrive through conventional hyperspace routes." Sarah nodded, though she still found the Voidwalkers unsettling. They existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to target but also difficult to coordinate with. Their technology was so advanced that most species considered them myths. "Captain Chen," interrupted the voice of Fleet Admiral Harrison from Earth's main command center, "we're detecting movement in the Council fleet. They appear to be forming attack formations." Sarah looked around the room at the assembled commanders representing dozens of species. Each of them had chosen to risk their ships and crews for humanity's sake. The weight of that responsibility was staggering. "All commanders return to your vessels," Sarah ordered. "It looks like Admiral Vextar has made his decision." As the alien commanders filed out, each offering traditional farewells in their own languages, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's xenocultural specialist, who had been quietly observing from the corner. "Captain, there's something you should understand about what's happening here," Dr. Vasquez said softly. "In all my years studying galactic cultures, I've never seen anything like this. Most species view alliances as temporary arrangements of convenience. But not these species? That's just it. They're not acting according to their traditional cultural patterns. The Corvans are naturally suspicious and isolated. The Thessians are typically neutral in all conflicts. The Andorians have never intervened in affairs beyond their immediate borders." Dr. Vasquez paused, choosing her words carefully. "Captain, they're not just here to repay debts. They're here because humanity showed them a different way to exist in the galaxy." Sarah frowned. "I don't understand. For millennia, galactic civilization has operated on the principle that strength determines worth. The Council maintains order through fear and superior firepower. But humanity introduced something revolutionary. The idea that species can help each other simply because it's right. And that's enough to risk war with the Council?" Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. "Captain, these species aren't just fighting for Earth. They're fighting for the right to live in a galaxy where kindness isn't seen as weakness, where helping others doesn't require hidden motives." Sarah felt the full weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about Earth's independence anymore. They had somehow become the symbol of an entirely different way of living among the stars. "Captain," Torres called from the bridge, "Admiral Vextar is transmitting on all frequencies." Sarah hurried to the bridge as Vextar's image appeared on the main screen. The reptilian scales had shifted to deep crimson, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. "Captain Chen, this is your final warning. Order your allies to withdraw immediately, or face the consequences of defying Council authority." Sarah stood straight, feeling the eyes of history upon her. "Admiral, you're the one who should withdraw. You came here expecting to find Earth alone and helpless. Instead, you've discovered that friendship is stronger than fear." "Friendship," Vextar spat. A primitive concept that will die with your primitive world. The first shots of the battle came from the Council's outer perimeter. Vextar had ordered his fastest vessels to probe the Allied defenses, testing their coordination and response times. Bright lances of energy streaked across the void between Earth and Luna. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the Allied fleet responded with precision that surprised even her. The Corvin heavy cruisers moved into intercept positions with practiced ease, their thick armor absorbing the initial barrage while their own weapons returned devastating volleys. Thessian bioships are adapting to Council weapon frequencies, reported Lieutenant Torres. They're actually growing stronger with each hit they take. Sarah nodded, remembering her briefings on Thessian biotechnology. Their ships were essentially living organisms that could evolve in real time, developing immunity to whatever attacked them. It was fascinating and slightly disturbing to watch. Andorian shields are holding at 97% efficiency, added Ensign. Their defensive matrix is distributing damage across the entire Allied formation. The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of the typical chaotic melee that characterized most space conflicts, the Allied fleet moved with the coordination of a single organism. Each species contributed their unique strengths while covering each other's weaknesses. Aboard the Council flagship, Admiral Vextar stared at his tactical displays in growing disbelief. His probing attack should have scattered the Allied formation, causing confusion and friendly fire incidents. Instead, the enemy fleet was responding with textbook precision. How are they coordinating so effectively? He demanded of his tactical officer. The Harmony Singers appear to be providing telepathic communication links, reported Sub-Commander Veltanar. Our jamming systems are having no effect on their coordination. Vextar's scales darkened further. The musical aliens were barely considered a legitimate species by most council members. Their pacifist philosophy and reliance on song-based communication had made them objects of ridicule. Now those same qualities were proving tactically invaluable. Sir, we're also detecting quantum interference patterns consistent with Void Walker technology, Veltanar continued. Our hyperspace communications with command are being disrupted. Impossible, snapped Intelligence Director Nalthor. The Void Walkers are a myth. Ancient legends of ships that can exist between dimensions. As if summoned by his skepticism, space itself seemed to bend near the Council's eastern flank. Ships that had been moving in normal formation suddenly found themselves surrounded by vessels that appeared from nowhere. The Void Walkers had made their presence known. All units, prepare for full engagement, Vextar ordered through gritted teeth. The Council will not be humiliated by primitives and their collection of misfits. The order went out across the massive Council fleet. Nearly 1,000 vessels began moving into attack formation, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire star systems. They represented the accumulated military might of the galaxy's dominant civilization. But as they advanced, something unexpected happened. The Allied fleet didn't retreat or scatter as conventional wisdom suggested they should. Instead, they began to sing. It started with the Harmony Singers, their crystalline voices creating complex melodies that resonated through subspace. Then the Corvins joined in with their traditional war chants, deep bass notes that spoke of honor and brotherhood. The Thessians added their own harmonic frequencies, bioelectrical songs that pulsed with life itself. Even species that didn't traditionally sing found their voices. The Mechanical Construct Collective generated electronic harmonies. The aquatic depths dwellers contributed sonar patterns that created rhythm and percussion. The normally silent Void Walkers added haunting melodies that seemed to come from between the spaces of reality. What are they doing? Demanded Council Representative Zernash, her crystalline form vibrating with confusion. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, listening to the incredible symphony echoing through her ship's communication systems. Tears ran down her cheeks as she realized what was happening. They're singing for us, she whispered to Commander Rodriguez. All of them. They're singing for Earth. Dr. Vasquez appeared at her elbow, equally moved by the display. Captain, this is unprecedented in galactic history. Each of those songs represents their species' highest expressions of loyalty and friendship. They're essentially declaring Earth to be family. The song reached its crescendo just as the Council fleet came into optimal firing range. But instead of the devastating Alpha strike that Vextar had planned, his ships found themselves facing something no military strategist had ever prepared for. The Allied fleet attacked as one mind with 1,000 bodies. Corvin heavy weapons opened gaps in council formations that Thessian bioships exploited with surgical precision. Andorian shield technology protected advancing units while Construct Collective vessels provided perfect targeting data through their networked consciousness. The Depths dwellers used their sonar abilities to detect cloaked council ships, while the Harmony Singers disrupted enemy communications through targeted telepathic interference. The Void Walkers simply appeared wherever council ships tried to retreat, cutting off escape routes and eliminating key command vessels. Impossible, Vextar breathed as his carefully planned battle lines crumbled. They're fighting like they've trained together for decades. Sir, reported Veltanar, his voice shaking, we're detecting massive quantum signatures throughout the system. More ships are arriving. The tactical display updated to show the truth that made Vextar's blood run cold. These weren't just more Allied vessels. These were the home fleets of every single species already engaged in the battle. They hadn't sent token forces to help humanity. They had committed everything. The Corvin Republic's entire naval force had arrived, including their legendary fortress ships that had never left their home system. The Thessian Collective's living capital ships, each one the size of a small moon, were emerging from hyperspace with their smaller vessels clustering around them like protective children. The Andorian Free States had brought their mobile shipyards, massive constructions that could build and repair vessels during battle. The Construct Collective had arrived with their manufacturing platforms, mechanical structures that could produce new ships faster than they could be destroyed. Even the mysterious races that had remained neutral for millennia were appearing. Ancient species that predated the Council itself were sending representatives. Ship designs that existed only in archaeological records were materializing in Earth's defense. Admiral Nalthor's gaseous form was fluctuating with what appeared to be panic. We're outnumbered 15-1, and the disparity is increasing every minute. Vextar stared at the display showing nearly 2,000 Allied vessels surrounding his fleet. This wasn't a battle anymore, it was a demonstration. Every species that had ever received help from humanity was making a statement that echoed across the galaxy. Sir, incoming transmission from multiple council member worlds, reported the communications officer. They're demanding to know why we're at war with half the galaxy. Vextar felt his carefully constructed authority crumbling around him. The Council's power had always depended on their ability to isolate and overwhelm individual species. They had never faced united opposition on this scale. Captain Chen is transmitting on all frequencies, announced another officer. Sarah's voice filled the Council flagship's bridge, calm and clear despite the chaos surrounding them. Admiral Vextar, you came here believing that Earth stood alone. You thought that because we're young we would be friendless, but you made a crucial error in your calculations. And what error was that? Vextar found himself asking despite his rage. You assumed that friendship follows the same rules as your political alliances. You thought help given would be forgotten once the crisis passed. You believed that kindness was weakness and that compassion was a luxury only the powerful could afford. Sarah paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of history. But you were wrong, Admiral. Friendship isn't a transaction. Love isn't a treaty. And when you threaten someone's family, you don't just face one enemy. You face them all. The quantum cascade began 30 minutes into the battle when the Void Walkers activated their dimensional anchors. Reality itself seemed to bend around Earth's solar system as they locked local spacetime into a configuration that prevented Council reinforcements from arriving. Through normal hyperspace routes, Admiral Vexistar watched his tactical situation deteriorate with each passing moment. His fleet of nearly 1,000 vessels was now completely surrounded by an ever-growing alliance that defied every principle of galactic politics he had ever learned. Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from the Council Core worlds, reported Communications Officer Lethmon. They're demanding immediate explanations for the current situation. Vexitar's scales had shifted to a pale yellow, indicating deep stress among his species. Put them through. The holographic display filled with the imposing figures of the Council's ruling body. High Chancellor Mordeth of the Prime Species occupied the central position, his ancient reptilian features bearing the weight of 3 centuries of galactic dominance. Admiral Vextar, Mordeth's voice carried the cold authority of absolute power. Explain why half the galaxy's military forces are currently engaged in combat operations against Council forces. Chancellor, the situation has developed beyond our initial projections, Vextar began carefully. The humans have somehow assembled a coalition of unprecedented size. Humans? High Magnate Clixara's mandibles clicked with agitation. You mean the primitive species we intended to incorporate as laborers? How could they possibly command such loyalty? The question hung in the air because none of the council members had an adequate answer. In their millennia of dominance, they had never encountered a species that inspired such devotion through anything other than fear or financial incentive. Perhaps, suggested Council Representative Zurnash, her crystalline form refracting nervous energy, we should investigate exactly what the humans offered these species to secure their allegiance. Intelligence Director Nalthor materialized his gaseous form into something resembling attention. Council members, our analysis indicates that the humans offered nothing in return for their assistance to these species. Their aid appears to have been genuinely altruistic. The silence that followed was profound. In the Council's understanding of the universe, altruism was either a myth or a mask for deeper manipulation. The concept that one species would risk their own safety to help others without expectation of reward was fundamentally incomprehensible. Impossible, High Chancellor Mordeth declared flatly. No species acts without self-interest. There must be hidden agreements, secret treaties, or coercion involved. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Defiance, Captain Sarah Chen was discovering the true scope of what humanity had inspired. The main conference room had been expanded with holographic displays to accommodate representatives from over 100 different species. Captain, reported Admiral Sivara of the Thessian Collective, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with colors that indicated deep emotion. Our homeworlds are sending additional support fleets. The Collective Council has authorized unlimited resource allocation for Earth's defense. Captain Zarthen of the Andorian Free States stepped forward, his environmental suit speakers conveying the formal tone his people used for momentous declarations. The Free States Assembly has passed Unanimous Resolution 2847. Earth is hereby declared a protected friend under the ancient laws of our people. Any threat to Earth is considered a threat to Andoria itself. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of support being offered. Captains, admirals, friends, I need you to understand something. When we helped your peoples, we never expected anything in return. We certainly never expected you to risk war with the Council for our sake. Commander Thrakan of the Corvan Republic stepped forward, his blue-scaled face bearing the ritual scars that marked him as a war leader of the highest rank. Captain Chen, with respect, you misunderstand the nature of what you have given us. I don't follow. For 3,000 years, the Corvan Republic has existed in isolation, Thrakan explained. We trusted no one, allied with no one, helped no one. We believed that strength came from standing alone. Then your ships arrived at Corvan Prime when the Council fleet was prepared to bombard our civilian centers. Sarah remembered that day clearly. Earth's small task force had been hopelessly outnumbered, but they had positioned themselves between the Council ships and the Corvan cities anyway. You didn't just save our lives that day, Thrakan continued. You showed us that we had been wrong about the nature of strength. True strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together. Similar sentiments echoed around the room as each species representative shared their own story. The Thessians spoke of the medical supplies that had saved their world from plague. The Andorians recalled the protection offered during their civil war. The Depths Dwellers remembered rescue operations in the deep ocean worlds where no other species could survive. But Dr. Vasquez had been right. This was about more than repaying debts. Each species had been fundamentally changed by their encounter with human values. Captain, interrupted the ethereal voice of the Voidwalker's representative, you should know that we have been observing your species since your first ventures into space. We have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Never before have we seen one that chose to help others at potential cost to themselves. Sarah frowned. You've been watching us? The Voidwalkers exist partially outside normal time, Dr. Vasquez explained quietly. They can observe events across multiple temporal streams. If they're saying this is unprecedented, then this really is a unique moment in galactic history. The Voidwalker's presence seemed to intensify. What your species has created here is not merely an alliance, Captain Chen. It is an evolution in how intelligent life can coexist. You have proven that cooperation based on genuine care is possible, even among entirely different forms of life. On the tactical displays, the battle continued to rage, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Council fleet was being systematically dismantled by coordinated, allied forces that fought with the precision of a single mind and the determination of beings defending their family. "Sir," reported Subcommander Veltanar aboard the Council flagship, "we've lost 30% of our fleet strength. Council forces are requesting permission to withdraw." Admiral Vexistar stared at the display showing his crumbling formation. Pride warred with pragmatism in his reptilian mind. The Council had never retreated from a lesser species, but they had also never faced anything like this. "Admiral," Intelligence Director Nalthor's voice carried an unusual note of urgency. "Long-range sensors are detecting additional quantum signatures. More fleets are arriving?" The truth that appeared on the tactical display would have been comic if it weren't so shocking. Species that the Council had never even heard of were emerging from hyperspace. Ancient races that had withdrawn from galactic civilization millennia ago were sending vessels. Exploration fleets from the galaxy's furthest reaches were changing course toward Earth. Word of humanity's defense was spreading faster than light itself, carried by the quantum communication networks that connected distant civilizations, and everywhere the message went, the response was the same. Species that had been helped by humans were abandoning their own affairs to come to Earth's aid. "How many fleets are we now facing?" Vextar asked weakly. "Current count exceeds 3,000 vessels, sir, with more arriving every hour," Veltanar reported. "Intelligence estimates suggest that if current arrival rates continue, we could be facing 10,000 ships within the next day." Vextar's scales had now shifted to the deep purple that indicated existential crisis among his people. In trying to subjugate one young species, the Council had somehow provoked a galactic uprising, based on principles they didn't even understand. "Sir," called the communications officer. "Captain Chen is transmitting again." Sarah's voice filled the bridge once more, but now it carried the authority of someone speaking for thousands of worlds. "Admiral Vexitar, you have one final opportunity to withdraw peacefully. Leave our system now and we will not pursue. Continue this aggression, and you will discover that the galaxy is much larger than the Council has ever imagined." The turning point came when the ancient progenitor ships arrived. Even the Void Walkers fell silent as reality twisted in ways that defied comprehension. The vessels that emerged from whatever dimension they had been sleeping in were older than recorded galactic history. Their technology was so advanced that they seemed to exist more as ideas than physical objects. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the newcomers through the viewports of the Defiance, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. These ships had witnessed the birth of civilizations that had themselves become legends. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez whispered, her voice filled with awe. "According to our xenoarchaeological records, those designs match fragments found in ruins that predate the Council by millions of years. The lead progenitor vessel was impossibly beautiful, its hull seeming to be crafted from crystallized starlight. When it transmitted, the voice that emerged spoke in frequencies that bypassed the ears entirely and resonated directly in the minds of every sentient being within the solar system. Young ones of Earth, the voice carried the weight of eons. We have watched your species since you first looked up at the stars with wonder. We have seen you stumble and fall, make mistakes and learn from them. But most importantly, we have seen you choose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Admiral Vextar's reptilian form was trembling aboard the Council flagship. The progenitors were legends even to the Council, mythical beings who had supposedly shaped the early galaxy before withdrawing from all contact with younger species. This cannot be happening. High Chancellor Mordith's voice crackled over the emergency communication link from the Council core worlds. The progenitors are myths, ancient stories told to explain archaeological sites, but the evidence was undeniable. Sensors throughout the system were detecting energy readings that exceeded anything in current galactic science. The progenitor ships existed in a state that was simultaneously material and ethereal, present in normal space while clearly operating according to principles that transcended conventional physics. Younger species, the progenitor voice continued, addressing the assembled fleets. You gather here to defend those who showed you compassion. This action honors the highest principles of existence. The humans have demonstrated something that we ourselves struggled to achieve in our youth. The wisdom to help others not because they must, but because they can. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the ancient being's words resonated through her consciousness. Around her, the bridge crew was similarly affected. Even Commander Rodriguez, normally unflappable in crisis situations, was openly weeping. However, the progenitor continued, there are those present who have forgotten that true power comes not from dominance but from service. They mistake fear for respect and cruelty for strength. The attention of every being in the system focused on the Council fleet. Admiral Vextar felt as though he were being examined by a force that could see directly into his soul. For too long, the ancient voice declared, the young ones calling themselves the Council have imposed their will through threat and violence. They have convinced themselves that might makes right, that the strong naturally rule the weak. They have forgotten the most fundamental truth of civilization. And what truth is that? Vextar found himself asking, though he wasn't sure he had spoken aloud or merely thought the question. That all life is precious. That every species, no matter how young or seemingly primitive, has the right to choose its own destiny. That true leadership means protecting and nurturing, not conquering and enslaving. The space around the Council fleet began to change. Reality itself seemed to become more solid, more real, as if the universe was suddenly paying closer attention to their location. You came here to enslave a species that has shown the galaxy a better way. The progenitor continued. Instead, you have provided them with the opportunity to demonstrate the true power of friendship. Observe what you have accomplished. The tactical displays throughout both fleets updated to show the full scope of what had gathered in Earth's defense. Over 5,000 vessels now filled the solar system, representing more than 300 different species. Ships that had never fought side by side were coordinating with the precision of a ballet performance. But it wasn't just the military vessels. Hospital ships had arrived to tend the wounded. Construction vessels were already repairing battle damage. Colony ships were bringing supplies and resources. Entire civilizations had mobilized not for conquest, but for protection. This is impossible, Admiral Vextar muttered, his worldview crumbling around him. Species don't abandon their own interests for others. They don't risk everything for principles, don't they? Asked the progenitor voice, somehow speaking directly to him. Look around you, young Admiral. See what your actions have revealed. As if compelled by forces beyond his control, Vextar found himself reviewing the tactical data with new eyes. Species that had been enemies for millennia were fighting side by side to protect Earth. Ancient rivals had put aside territorial disputes to answer humanity's call for help. The Mechanical Construct Collective was providing repair services to biological ships whose very existence they had previously considered philosophical impossibilities. The telepathic harmony singers were translating between species that had never been able to communicate before. The mysterious Voidwalkers were sharing technology that they had guarded for eons. You see, the progenitor explained gently, what the humans have given these species is not just assistance in times of need. They have provided something far more valuable, an example of how to live with honor. Captain Sarah Chen was listening to this exchange while simultaneously coordinating with her growing alliance. The Bridge of the Defiance had become a nerve center for the largest peaceful coalition in galactic history. Captain, reported Admiral Thraken from his position coordinating Corvin forces, our sensors are detecting surrender signals from approximately 30% of the Council fleet. Many of their ships are requesting permission to withdraw. Sarah felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the bloodshed might end soon, but sadness that it had been necessary at all. Grant safe passage to any Council vessel that wishes to leave, she ordered. We're not here to destroy anyone. We're here to protect Earth and preserve the right of all species to choose their own futures. Her words were transmitted across all frequencies, reaching every ship in the system. The response was immediate. Council vessels began breaking formation, many of them signaling their intent to withdraw. Some requested permission to defect entirely, their crews unwilling to continue serving a government that would attack peaceful civilizations. But Admiral Vextar was not among those seeking retreat. Something in the progenitor's words had sparked a recognition that was more painful than any physical wound. He was seeing his entire civilization from the outside for the first time, and the view was devastating. We were supposed to be the guardians of galactic order, he said aloud, speaking to no one in particular. We were meant to bring stability and progress to younger species, and instead, prompted the progenitor voice, Instead, we became exactly what we were supposed to protect against. We became the bullies, the oppressors, the ones who crush hope and steal freedom. The admission seemed to physically pain the reptilian admiral. His scales shifted through a spectrum of colors that indicated profound emotional turmoil. Wisdom can come at any age, the progenitor observed compassionately. The question is what you choose to do with that wisdom. Around Earth's solar system, a moment of profound transformation was taking place. The galaxy's oldest civilization was offering judgment, not through force of arms, but through the simple expedient of making everyone see clearly what they had become. And in that clarity, the future of galactic civilization hung in the balance. The revolution began not with weapons or declarations, but with a simple question asked by a young council ensign aboard a minor patrol vessel. "Sir," Ensign Ket Ala asked her captain, a grizzled Valdorian warrior named Morthex, "why are we fighting people who save lives?" Captain Morthex paused in his review of tactical data, his crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. It was a question that had been growing in his mind like a persistent ache, but hearing it voiced by someone else gave it weight he could no longer ignore. "Because the council commands it," he replied automatically, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "But sir," the young ensign pressed, "I've been reading the intelligence reports about human interventions. They saved the Thessian homeworld from plague. They protected Corvan civilians from orbital bombardment. They provided disaster relief to dozens of worlds without asking for anything in return. Why would the council want to enslave people like that?" Morthex found himself without an adequate answer. Throughout the council fleet, similar conversations were taking place as crew members struggled to reconcile their orders with the evidence of human character. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Vextar was experiencing his own crisis of faith. The progenitor's words had stripped away layers of conditioning and propaganda, leaving him face to face with uncomfortable truths about the civilization he had served his entire life. "Status report," he ordered, more from habit than genuine interest in continuing the battle. "Sir," Sub-Commander Veltanar replied hesitantly, "we now have confirmed desertion attempts from over 200 vessels. Many more are requesting permission to withdraw. Morale is collapsing across the fleet." The tactical display showed the reality of their situation. What had begun as an overwhelming force of conquest was now a demoralized collection of ships whose crews were questioning everything they had ever believed about their place in the galaxy. "Sir," Communications Officer Lethmon interrupted, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the Council Corps worlds. High Chancellor Mordith is demanding immediate compliance with original mission parameters." Vextar stared at the communication indicator for a long moment before making a decision that would echo through galactic history. "Ignore the transmission," he ordered quietly. "Sir?" Veltanar's voice carried shock and concern. "I said ignore it." Vexitar's scales had shifted to a deep blue that indicated profound contemplation among his species. "Contact Captain Chen. I wish to speak with her directly." Meanwhile, aboard the UES Defiance, Sarah Chen was coordinating what had become the largest peaceful fleet assembly in galactic history. Ships continued to arrive hourly, each bringing representatives from species that had been touched by human kindness. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres announced, "Admiral Vextar is requesting a direct communication channel. He's transmitting on diplomatic frequencies." Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Rodriguez. "Put him through." Vextar's image appeared on the main screen, but he looked different than in their previous conversations. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Captain Chen," he began, his voice lacking its former commanding tone, "I find myself in an unprecedented situation." "How so, Admiral?" "I have spent my entire life believing that the Council represented order and progress in the galaxy. I believed that our authority was justified by our strength and wisdom." Vextar paused, his scales shifting through colors that indicated deep emotional conflict. "The events of today have forced me to confront the possibility that I was wrong." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "Admiral, it's never too late to choose a different path." "Perhaps," Vextar replied. "But first I need to understand something. Why? Why did your species risk everything to help others? What did you hope to gain?" The question was broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every ship in the system. In the silence that followed, Sarah realized that her answer would be heard by millions of beings from hundreds of worlds. "Admiral," she began, choosing her words carefully, "when we first reached the stars, We carried with us the dreams and hopes of everyone who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. We brought our best qualities: curiosity, compassion, the desire to learn and grow. But more than that, she continued, we brought the understanding that we were not alone. Every species we met was someone's children, someone's family. How could we turn our backs when family needed help? Her words resonated through the quantum communication networks that connected the vast fleet. On thousands of ships, crew members of hundreds of different species found themselves moved by the simple honesty of her answer. You gained nothing, Vextar said, and it wasn't quite a question. We gained everything, Sarah corrected gently. We gained friends. We gained the knowledge that we could make a difference. We gained the satisfaction of knowing that when we were tested, we chose to be worthy of the stars we had claimed. Throughout the Council fleet, something unprecedented was happening. Individual ships were beginning to break formation not to flee, but to approach the Allied vessels. The destroyer Talvareth moved to within communication range of a Corvin cruiser. The frigate Nextalar positioned itself near a Thessian bioship. Admiral, reported a confused Veltanar, our ships they're approaching the enemy fleet. They're not enemies, Vextar said quietly. I'm beginning to think they never were. On dozens of ships, Council crew members were requesting permission to come aboard Allied vessels. They wanted to meet the beings they had been ordered to conquer, to understand what had inspired such loyalty to Earth. Captain Morthex of the patrol vessel Siltharan was among the first to make contact. He transported across to the Corvin cruiser Faithful Storm, where he was greeted by Admiral Thraken himself. Why are you here? The Corvin warrior asked directly. To understand, Morthex replied honestly. My crew and I have served the Council faithfully for decades. We believed we were bringing order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. But if that's true, why are we fighting the civilized ones? Thraken studied the crystalline being before him. In Corvin culture, honesty was the highest virtue, and he recognized it when he heard it. Come, he said, gesturing toward the ship's memorial chamber. Let me show you something. The chamber contained holographic displays showing the history of Corvin Prime during the siege that had nearly destroyed their civilization. Morthex watched in stunned silence as the records showed Earth's small task force, positioning themselves between Council, bombardment ships, and Corvin civilian centers. They were outnumbered 20-1, Thraken explained. Their ships were inferior to ours in every measurable way. But they stayed. They fought. They bled to protect people they had never met. But why? Morthex whispered. Because it was right, Thraken replied simply. Because someone had to stand up to bullies, even if those bullies wore the badge of authority. Similar scenes were playing out across the system as Council personnel met with the species they had been ordered to help subjugate. Each encounter revealed the same pattern. Humans helping those in need, asking nothing in return, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of a better galaxy. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Vextar was coming to a realization that would change the course of galactic history. Captain Chen, he transmitted on open frequency so that both fleets could hear, I believe the Council has lost its way. We have become the very thing we were founded to oppose. What are you saying, Admiral? Vextar's scales shifted to the gold that indicated momentous decision among his people. I am saying that perhaps it is time for new leadership in the galaxy. Leadership that understands that true strength comes from service, not domination. The implications of his words rippled through both fleets. A Council admiral was essentially declaring revolution against his own government, inspired by the example set by humanity and their allies. Admiral, Sarah said carefully, are you prepared for the consequences of that position? Captain, Vextar replied with the first genuine smile his species could manage. I am prepared to discover what kind of galaxy we can build when we choose to stand together instead of apart. 1 year later, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of New Geneva, watching representatives from over 400 species take their seats for the inaugural session of the Galactic Alliance of Free Worlds. The massive chamber had been constructed using technology shared freely by dozens of civilizations, creating a space where beings of radically different physiologies could coexist comfortably. The transformation had been swift, but not without cost. The Council's old guard had not surrendered power willingly. When Admiral Vexistar formally declared the independence of his fleet and called for democratic reforms throughout Council space, the response had been immediate and violent. The Second Galactic War had lasted only 6 months, but its outcome had never truly been in doubt. The old council found themselves facing not just Earth and its original allies, but nearly 3/4 of their own former territories. Species that had been subjugated for centuries rose up when they realized they were not alone, that there were others willing to fight for freedom. The progenitors had provided guidance but not military intervention, stating that younger species needed to choose their own destiny without coercion from their elders. The wisdom of that decision had become clear as the alliance grew stronger through shared struggle rather than imposed peace. Delegates of the alliance, Sarah addressed the assembly in her role as the first Secretary General, a position she had accepted reluctantly, but performed with distinction. We gather today not as conquerors or conquered, but as partners in the greatest experiment in galactic history. The translation systems hummed quietly as her words were rendered into hundreds of languages, chemical signals, telepathic frequencies, and forms of communication that human science was still learning to understand. Admiral Vextar, now serving as the Alliance's Chief of Defense, stood to address the assembly. His scales had permanently shifted to the gold that indicated contentment among his species, a change that xenobiologists were still trying to understand. 1 year ago, he began, I came to Earth's solar system believing that might made right, that the strong naturally ruled the weak. I learned instead that true strength comes from standing together, that real power flows from the willing cooperation of free beings. The chamber erupted in a symphony of approval, as each species expressed agreement in their own way. The musical tones of the harmony singers blended with the harmonic frequencies of crystalline beings, while bioluminescent patterns rippled across the surfaces of aquatic delegates. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Alliance's Chief Cultural Advisor, had spent the past year documenting the unprecedented cooperation that had emerged. Her research had revealed that the Alliance wasn't just a political arrangement. It was evolving into something entirely new in galactic history, traditional. Xenosociological models predicted that such a diverse coalition would fragment within months, she had written in her latest report. Instead, we're seeing the emergence of a hybrid civilization that combines the best aspects of hundreds of different cultures while maintaining respect for individual uniqueness. The proof was visible throughout the chamber. Corvin engineers were working with Thessian biotechnologists to develop living buildings that could adapt to their occupants' needs. Andorian shield technology was being shared freely with former council worlds for disaster relief efforts. The mysterious Voidwalkers had established permanent embassies for the first time in recorded history. But perhaps the most remarkable change was visible in the former council territories themselves. Species that had been oppressed for generations were rediscovering their own cultures while simultaneously embracing the Alliance's principles of mutual aid and cooperation. The humans taught us something profound, declared Ambassador Klixara, the former High Magnate, who had become one of the Alliance's most effective advocates for reform. They showed us that helping others doesn't diminish you. It makes you part of something greater. Captain Thrackan, now Admiral of the Corvin Republic's expanded fleet, stood to deliver his people's formal commitment to the Alliance Charter. The Corvin Republic pledges its ships, its resources, and its honor to the defense of freedom throughout the galaxy. Never again will we stand alone when others need help. Similar pledges followed from every delegation. The Thessian Collective committed their medical technology to establishing healing centers throughout the galaxy. The Construct Collective offered their manufacturing capabilities for infrastructure development on war-torn worlds. Even the ancient progenitors formally blessed the Alliance, though they maintained their traditional role as advisors rather than active participants. But the day's most moving moment came when representatives from the former Council Core worlds approached the podium. These were the species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and their presence in the Alliance had been controversial among some members. High Chancellor Mordith, the ancient reptilian who had once commanded absolute power, spoke with genuine humility. For 3,000 years, my people told ourselves that we ruled by right of strength and wisdom. We convinced ourselves that our dominion was necessary for galactic order. His voice carried the weight of genuine remorse. We were wrong. We had become tyrants who confused fear with respect, compliance with loyalty. The humans and their allies showed us a better way, even when we refused to listen. He paused, his ancient features reflecting the pain of acknowledging centuries of mistakes. Today, the Valdorian Empire formally dissolves itself. We place our worlds, our resources, and our future under the protection of this alliance, not as rulers but as students learning to live with honor. The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. The species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia was voluntarily surrendering power in favor of democratic participation. Sarah, Chen felt tears running down her cheeks as she witnessed the formal end of an age of tyranny and the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Around her, beings from hundreds of worlds were similarly moved by the moment. "The Alliance Charter is hereby ratified," she announced, her voice carrying across the chamber and throughout the galaxy via quantum communication networks. "Today marks the beginning of a new age, one where every species has a voice, where cooperation replaces domination, and where the strong protect the weak not because they must, but because they choose to." As the delegates erupted in celebration, each species expressing joy in their own unique way, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a simple human belief that helping others was right, regardless of the cost or consequences. That belief had inspired loyalty that transcended species boundaries, creating bonds stronger than any treaty or trade agreement. It had shown the galaxy that there was an alternative to the ancient cycle of conquest and submission. Admiral Vextar approached the podium as the celebration continued around them. "Captain Chen," he said formally, then smiled in the way his species had learned from humans. "Sarah, there's something the Alliance should know." "What's that, Admiral?" "Long-range exploration fleets have made contact with civilizations beyond our galaxy. They're watching what we're building here with great interest. It seems that our little experiment in cooperation is attracting attention from across the universe." Sarah felt a familiar thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. Humanity had barely begun to understand their place in their own galaxy, and now they were discovering that there were other galaxies full of intelligent life. "Are they friendly?" she asked. Vextar's scales shifted to the deep blue that indicated amusement among his people. "They're curious. They want to know how a young species convinced half the galaxy to embrace ideals that most civilizations abandon as they mature." "And what do we tell them?" "The truth," Vextar replied simply. "That friendship is stronger than fear, that love builds more than hate ever destroys, and that when you stand for what's right, you never stand alone." As the celebration continued around them, Sarah looked out through the chamber's massive windows at the ships of the Alliance fleet. Hundreds of vessels from as many worlds hung in space above Earth, their diverse designs creating a tapestry of cooperation that would have been impossible to imagine just a year earlier. The galaxy had changed forever, not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple recognition that all beings deserved freedom, dignity, and the chance to choose their own destiny. And at the heart of that transformation was a truth that humanity had carried with them to the stars, that in a universe vast and often cruel, kindness was not weakness but the strongest force of all. The age of empires was ending. The age of alliance had begun,